So continuing our uh, talk about product development, we talked about the impact of innovation and imitation, and what it does is it does impact the product life cycle. And it's either going to affect the curves, uh, whether or not it ships left and right in time, or whether or not it affects the shape of the curve, which is actually called a kurtosis. How much it's going to spike. And so if I have a lot of innovation taking place, my curve is going to move to the left. It's going to move to the left because if I have an innovative product, people are going to be interested, and so subsequently I'm going to get this big, huge, my growth is going to be a lot faster. And that's what we saw in those other curves. How many years after release, you saw how quickly cell phone was rising. On the other hand, if I don't have a lot of innovation, then it's going to move to the right, and it's going to just slowly adopt. On the other hand, in terms of imitation, if my market is full of imitators, then what ends up happening is the curve goes flat. And that's that early on, people just aren't going to be all that interested. On the other hand, if I have a lot of imitation, then my curve is going to be more spiky shaped, just because a lot of people are going to come on board very rapidly. The thing is, when I look at innovation, I have to think about my cost benefits and how do I go about um, okay, so continuing on our talk about um, product development, the thing is, in terms of the life cycle, do I have innovations or innovators, or are my customers mostly more like imitators? And what happens is, if I have a lot of innovation, naturally I have a lot of early buyers. And if I have a lot of early buyers, my curve is going to shift to the left. If I don't have a lot of early buyers, people who want to try things, it shifts to the right. On the other hand, in terms of innovators, what that does is actually change the shape of my curve, which is called the kurtosis. And what ends up happening is, if I have a lot of imitators, I get spikes. My growth happens very, very quickly. On the other hand, if my market isn't based on networks and it's not based on imitators don't have a very large impact, then my curve goes flat. All of that makes logical sense. If I do a sanity check in thinking about innovation, I have to think about how easily can I communicate what's my cost benefit of my product, and how much is it going to cost for customers to go ahead and try my product. In terms of testing, what marketing tools can I apply to product development? I can use segmentation to figure out features, conjoint to target figures, and looking at the adoption of these features to try to predict it by looking at analogous products, see what they did, see how it compares to what I need to do. You use the exact same tools in terms of segmenting features as you do in segmentation of markets. And that's that you can use trees, you can use bullseyes. The thing is, when you have lots of different combinations, how do you handle 27 combinations? And that's what you figure out, which are more important and which are less important. And so an approach of that is actually doing conjoint. And so, for example, and I have to think about the number of levels. What if I did a conjoints study, and what do people want in chewing gum? I want to release a new chewing gum. So I pick my attributes, and I decide my attributes are how much I charge per ounce. Now, people aren't going to pay $100 for chewing gum, but maybe they'll pay $5. How long does a gum last? How hard is it? Do I have a nice soft gum? Do I have a hard gum? And how sweet is it? And so with all this, I come out with 48 combinations. But what I do is I start bundling it into product types. And that's that I only come up with 8 choices. And I ask people, by bundling those choices together, what they like. So Double Bubble has one kind of gum. Wrigley has a different kind of gum. And so the rating levels, I could use a Likert scale, like 1 to 5, 1 to 7, or 1 to 10. And so what ends up happening is once I do that conjoint analysis, I could do regression. And what regression will do is give me the coefficients for how people rated either the Wrigley type gum, the Pure type gum. Now the reason why the third one isn't there is if Wrigley and Pure are both 0, then I know it's leaning towards the other kind of gum. And that's why all the variables aren't there. And so what the coefficient tells me is basically how much weighted importance is there and how is it leaning. Again, the way I treat non-numerics is I arbitrarily pick 2 values, and U is the utility, how much they relate, how much they like it. This is a refresher again. If significance level just means, is this data just random occurrences, or is it really based on some kind of opinion or some kind of driving factor? And t-statistics are based on whether or not there's a relationship between 2 different effects. Now, there are different kinds of conjoints that you can use and different kinds of techniques. And adaptive conjoint is about giving people pairs of things and letting them choose. And where this is really good is if you have lots of attribute levels or lots of comparisons, then this is a good way to figure out what customers actually prefer more. And you can extract out whether or not memory or brand is more important. The thing about adaptive conjoint is you can also basically make it like a tree. For example, you want to learn about housing habits. And so they live in Arizona, want a house. Then you have one set of questions. They live in Arizona but don't have a house. You send them to a second set of questions. So this is what adaptive means. Your survey changes according to what audience, and so you can get different kinds of information. And if they don't live in a house and don't want a house, then, thank you for taking the interview. Choice base, which I talked about once before. Choice is about you actually give them choices, profiles of products that actually exist. So this isn't a preference. This now becomes a choice. Self-explicated conjoint is basically the attribute levels are evaluated to see how desirable they are. And so you figure out what's the most desirable, least desirable of the techniques. And the way you do about that, do this, is that you figure out the levels and groupings, and you end up taking the average. And all of this is explained in your book. That's why I'm just kind of blowing past all this. And hierarchical Bayes conjoint is used for large databases, and it's used to find subgroups and relationships. And anything time you see the word by, it means it's dependent on something that already exists. Am I ever going to ask you about that again? No, but I just wanted to make you aware of it. The thing about conjoint techniques is they're extremely powerful to determine what product features that you actually want. What is it that they value? In terms of startups, there are other parameters you have to think about in terms of your product development, meaning manufacturing. A lot of startups don't think about it right away. They just think about, let's just get it out there. But I've run into a bunch of startups that don't think about scaling. And that's what's killing them. And it's amazing. In my 482 startup workshop class, I just had a simple exercise. Tell me how your business will scale. Oh my God, what a bunch of crappy papers I got back. They never really thought about it. You have to think about issues like regulatory channels. Do you want to be online, or do you want to be bricks and mortar? And there are pros and cons to that. Or should I form partnerships? So in terms of your products, these are the things you need to think about. But what it comes down to is, in terms of product development, the 3 things that shape it the most. And of course, the other 2 C's matter too. But mostly it's about your customer preferences. What do they tell you? What your competition is doing, how are you going to respond to them? And you as a company, what is it that you do well and what is it that you didn't? Like, for example, Kodak. Kodak had these massive chemical plants. And what did they do? They kept trying to compete in the photo business. The problem, the big mistake Kodak should have done is they should have pivoted. They should have pivoted into the chemical industry because that's what their core strength was. They're not good at writing software, making chips, or selling devices, but that's what they tried to do, and it got them killed. They had too much myopia into the business when they're in. And so these are the things that drive your product development.